Well, welcome to all of you friends of Technocracy News from around the country, around the world. It's good to have you back again. I'll also say welcome to those who may not be so good a friend of Technocracy News and Trends. Yes, we have our detractors. Not today, hopefully, but there are detractors out there who think technocracy is just great, and the sooner we get there, the better. I'm not one of them, and I expect you probably are not either. Well, today we're going to go back to the big story of the decade, if not the century, and that is the Great Panic of 2020. I do believe this will go down in history as the Great Panic of 2020. That's why I keep calling it time and time again. I refuse to call it just a pandemic or just a lockdown or whatever. No. The virus is one issue. The response to the virus is another issue. They're two separate issues, and we need to treat them that way. Is there a virus? Absolutely. Is it a deadly virus? Probably not more than the flu, as we'll find out in this particular episode today. But hard data is coming out now that's disproving all of the epidemiologists that have predicted dire results for the entire planet if we don't lock down the global economy. See, this was a political policy in a sense. Well, actually, it's an economic policy because shutting down the economy is shutting down the economy. That's not a political problem. This is something that they've been clamoring for a long time and could never achieve under the mantra of global warming and climate change. Those alarmists who told us that we're all going to die because the heat's going to scorch the earth and the polar bears are going to die, etc., well, they failed. They failed miserably. And they failed up to the point where all of a sudden they realized that global cooling is coming straight ahead. Why is that? Because the sunspots have disappeared from the face of the sun. This happens every so many years on a cycle. It's nothing new. It's been going on for time immemorial. But now that the sunspot cycle is at its ebb, its lowest point in many years, the weather's going to cool. They know that. They can't push that mantra anymore. So they switched horses. It became the pandemic. They latched on to the virus instead of global warming. What do they care what the stimulus is? One's as good as another. The key thing here that's common between all of it is panic. They want us to panic, and in a state of panic, they can bring sustainable development as the only possible solution that will solve our problem. And that's exactly what's happening. I said this weeks ago, that this would be what would happen in the end of this, that all of the climate change crowd would come out and say, 3 cheers for COVID-19. All the stimulus money that's going to be spent is going to be spent on green projects, green jobs, green infrastructure, sustainable development items. That's exactly what's happening today. But the epidemiologists, who are mathematicians and computer programmers and data modelers, don't know squat about medicine. They're not medical personnel at all, but they somehow think they have a right to talk. They don't. In my opinion, they don't have any right to talk about medical issues. My doctor might, my personal doctor, your personal doctor might have something to say to you about the virus, but all of the response to this, the Great Panic of 2020, all of the response to this has been driven in one direction, and it is not the health of the people. They could care less about the health of the people. And I'm going to take you to a web story here, a story that I posted on Technocracy News recently. It's a good one, and it underscores exactly what I'm talking about. Social isolation. This is a new study. Social isolation increases risk of death from all causes by 50%. Oh, really? From all causes. That means heart, other internal problems that you might have, hyperventilation, mental disorders, mental problems, aneurysms, I mean, you name it, lung problems. Social isolation is not the normal state of man. Man will not thrive, or women, of course, will not thrive in a state of social isolation. What do you think, by the way, all of the cruel prisons in history who have been rogue prisons, more or less, all had a box. It was called the isolation box. And whenever a prisoner needed to be broken mentally and physically, they would throw him in the box by himself, or maybe herself, I don't know, but they'd get the box. And they would stay in there until they were broken, and they'd bring them out. This is what social isolation does to people. It takes away their hope. It degrades their immune system. It degrades their will to live, by the way, because they're just simply not happy in isolation. Humans are social beings, for Pete's sake. These technocrats know that. It was never about the health of the people. Well, this study really brings it out. Social isolation, they found, increases the risk of death from all causes by 50%. I wrote at the top of this, computer models predicting death by COVID-19 are themselves weaponized toward a specific agenda because they only reflect a tiny segment of societal risk. Tiny, tiny segment. If they were truly working for the good of mankind, all of these very well-known factors would have been included. You cannot disagree with that. You can do anything you want to do with a computer model. I remember playing a game some years ago, maybe with some young people, called The Game of Life. And it was about life. It was about building cities and, interaction with people and stuff. And if you made mistakes, well, you got, some people or some blocks wiped out, and you had to build them back. Well, you can build a computer model any way you want to do anything you want it to do. If anybody truly had a brain to help people themselves, to actually help society, they would have built a computer model that factored in all of these other items. Like, what would happen if we put people in isolation? How would that affect anything? They could have done that. They could have done it with any other factor as well, but they didn't. They chose to stay focused on one thing, and that's the virus and virus alone, to say that there would be 1.2 million Americans die as a result of this if they didn't do what they said to do. And their policies that they trotted out was social distancing, locking down the economy, staying at home, wearing masks, not communicating with anybody. And I'll tell you what, if you had a loved one, a mother or an uncle or a relative in a nursing home, and they were towards the end of life, and hospice maybe had called you and said, your mom or your dad or whatever is probably very close to passing, but you aren't allowed to go in. You're not allowed to go into that nursing home because you might infect those people, or maybe they figure they might infect you. Should anybody's mother, father, uncle, or loved one die alone because of this crazy thing that's been foisted on society? This is a scam, an outright scam of epic proportions. And until people really get a handle on this, they are not going to get out of it. Just that simple. Well, this study says social isolation is a word on the tip of everyone's tongues these days. Staying away from others during this pandemic is keeping us safe. But a new study finds that prolonged social isolation is also quite dangerous. Researchers warn that socially isolated people are over 40% more likely to suffer a heart attack, stroke, or other major cardiovascular event. Moreover, the socially isolated are near 50% more likely to die from any cause. There was also an observed relationship between lack of financial support and increased cardiovascular risk. The study was conducted by Dr. Janine Gronwald and Professor Dick Herman from the University Hospital in Essen, Germany. They analyzed data on 4,316 people, average age 59 years old, who had been recruited for research between 2000 and 2003. And there you go. This is the kind of story you need to print and show to people who are steeped in panic over this virus. There are so many falsehoods floating around. People, I can't call them lying. People aren't lying about it. They just don't know. When anybody says that a virus is a living thing, it is not. It's not a bacteria. Bacteria is alive. It actually has life. A virus is not something that is alive. There's nothing to kill. It is something that once it gets into your body, kind of like a poison, if you will, it gets into your body, latches onto your cells, and begins to replicate itself, or it begins to be replicated within the cell, because it tricks your cell into replicating it. It doesn't have a mind of its own. It doesn't have a will of its own. That's why your immune system is so important, because once these viruses come into your body, the normal reaction of your immune system is send troops to neutralize it and to kill it before it gets out of hand, before too many cells get involved in replicating the virus, and it overwhelms your immune system and you get sick. There's nothing magical or mystical about a virus. A virus, furthermore, cannot be sanitized away. There's nothing to kill. You can use hand sanitizer until the cows come home. It will not kill something that is not living. However, if you have bacteria on your hands, it'll kill that. That's a good thing. If you want to kill bacteria, absolutely. But the only thing that could get rid of the virus, if it's on your hands or anywhere else, is just to wash it up. That's it. Wash it away. Got a surface that you think is contaminated? Don't spray it with all this stuff trying to kill something. There's nothing to kill. Get a rag, put some dishwasher soap on it or whatever cleaner on it, and wipe the area, and it will get rid of the virus that's on the area. Just that simple. So these things that could have been predicted in computer models but were not, there you go. This was the plan. This was the purposeful plan. And I've said this by the way, ever since I discovered that the original alarmist in this entire program of panic was Professor Neil Ferguson at Imperial College London, an epidemiologist, a data modeler, a horrible programmer, by the way, but he was the one that came out and panicked the world into locking down, shutting down, social distancing, closing all the schools, et cetera, et cetera. It was him. He's a technocrat. He runs with the same crowd that chases global warming alarmism. Same group of people at Imperial College. They simply changed horses because they knew that global warming was not going to take them any further. They'd thrown everything at global warming they could except the kitchen sink. I think maybe they did. They threw, for instance, Greta Thunberg at it. Well, poor old Greta hopped up and down, and she went to the United Nations and shamed everybody and made them all feel bad, I guess. And then she went home and they said, oh, well, she's gone. Nothing happened with Greta. She produced nothing, no results. There was an elasticity that had reached the end of its stretch. You just can only stretch so far. So they gave it up and they switched horses over to COVID-19. I'll say it again. The virus is one issue. The Great Panic of 2020 is another issue. They are two separate issues. They need to be treated that way as well. Now let me bring up one of my favorite people, Christiana Figueres. You might remember her if you've read Technocracy News for a few years. She was the climate czar at the United Nations during the very famous now Paris Conference on Climate Change several years ago. It was Christiana Figueres that shortly after that event said in a press release that the goal of the United Nations was to replace capitalism and free enterprise with sustainable development. She came right out and said it. You can't get any more plain. She just came right out and said it. And she said it on behalf of the United Nations. This was an admission that they had a timetable, that they had a specific intention, and that they had a plan on how to get there and an outcome they were desiring to achieve. So, she's back in the news. Christiana Figueres is not working for the United Nations anymore. She's still carrying on her mission to transform the world into sustainable development, but she's working for an NGO now, nonprofit organization. She came on just this week and she says that governments of the world, including the usual hit list like Brazil and the United States and so on, are being irresponsible when it comes to COVID-19. And good old Christiana, I know she is one of the most regular people. You could count on her to say certain things at all times, and she'll never waver from it because she believes it so deeply in her heart. I don't know if she knows that, she's dealing with a lot of falsehoods. I don't think it really matters, but she is a spokesman for all this stuff. And good old Christiana Figueres, former head of climate change, succinctly ties together COVID-19 and climate change hysterias. There's two hysterias here. Now they're bonded together in order to drive the deep economic transformation of sustainable development, aka technocracy. In my book, by the way, Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order, I document very carefully that sustainable development is technocracy that started out in the 1930s. Very little policy has changed, but the names have changed because sustainable development is easier to market than technocracy. It needs to be called technocracy, however, because that's what it is. So here's what she says. The US, the UK, and Brazil have been nothing but irresponsible in their isolationist approaches to the coronavirus, and such stances will weaken the global response to climate change. Here it comes. Climate action advocate Christiana Figueres has said, at the same time, she claimed, the pandemic had created an opportunity to reinvent the economy in a way that valued sustainable outcomes over growth. Now, you understand what growth is. Economic growth, that's when things kind of go forward. That's when businesses increase their footprint, increase their sales, increase their earnings, increase the number of employees they have working for themselves. Well, forget growth. It's all about sustainable development, baby. It's about using less resources. Well, you can't make stuff with less resources, can you? You can't grow if you have limited resources to draw on, and you can't grow if you have limited people to buy your product. Well, they figured that all into the great panic of 2020. It's perfect. So now she's coming out and she's just saying it. Yep, the two are now related. And moreover, the 13 trillion or so, whatever, 30 trillion, 300 trillion, who knows how much money they're going to spend on this. She's making a case that all this money, all of it, needs to be spent on the new Green Deal. Let that sink in. This is the redirection of wealth in the world away from the bad brown economy into the good green economy. Oh, everybody loves the color green, don't they? I don't know. I guess I like green. I like blue better. But the point is, Green New Deal sells. Sustainable development doesn't have much of a sizzle to it, quite honestly. It's not something anybody can get excited about. But put a color to it, like green, wow. I better take a look at that because it's green after all. Crazy. So she's right behind it. Well, here's another piece of evidence for you. The London School of Economics, LSE. I put this story up straight from their website. Public demand for technocracy rises during crisis. We're having a crisis right now, aren't we? Well, that's what this is talking about. This was written on May 21st, and it appeared on LSE's website. So this is official policy. The London School of Economics is the pinnacle of globalist education, and it speaks naturally about technocracy and rule by experts. The trend to note here is that during a crisis, like the global panic of 2020, the public, they say, demands technocracy. Isn't that something? Well, of course they do. They get so beat down because things aren't working that they'll take anybody that can fix it. You know, we live in Arizona. occasionally somebody's air conditioner goes down, breaks, whatever. That's not very nice to happen when it's 110 out. Your house heats up to about 95 in 15 minutes, and you're getting very hot. You're stripping off your clothes, and you're drinking ice water, and you're misting yourself with a bottle of water and trying to figure out, when is that guy going to show up? So who do you call? You call a plumber? No. You call the best expert air conditioning man you can find in town. If you can find one that's available. That's another problem here in Arizona. A lot of them aren't available in the summertime because they're too busy fixing other people's air conditioner. But you want an expert. You call for Mr. Fix-It. Same thing with plumbing. Any other problem you can't handle yourself, you say, look, I need this. I just need it fixed. This is what's happening around the world right now. As things crumble because of what these technocrats have done, instead of identifying those technocrats as rats and sending them packing, the people are begging for more technocracy. Oh, this makes so little sense, my friends. This is so crazy. If people understood that this was technocracy in the first place, they wouldn't be asking for more of it. But LSE makes a perfect case on why the public around the world is crying out for technocracy. They believe, or they've been sold a bill of goods, that democracy is dead, that our constitutional republic in our country is dead, and that the only hope is for technical experts to come in and run everything. People like Anthony Fauci, for instance, and his sidekick, Dr. Birx. They would have no problem just running everything according to science, you see. They never took into account the study we just talked about, what happens when people don't have social contact with each other. They know that. They're scientists, and they must have had a course somewhere along the way in their life that told them that people are social beings. Maybe they're not social. I don't know. Maybe could be they just have personality traits that doesn't need people one way or another. Maybe they just don't understand or get it. I don't know. Well, the London School of Economics has let the cat out of the bag again, and there's a paradox here. The more technocracy ruins the world, the more people cry out for more. You can see where this is headed, can't you? There needs to be a clear identification of these technocrats and the technocracy that they're pushing. They're the ones that need to be sent packing. Unfortunately, the public may wake up to this too late. One more story. I got to get back to the wrong story. One more story. The CDC came out just today, and they confirmed an extremely low COVID-19 death rate. Now, I'll tell you why this is important. About a week ago, Stanford University, actually 10 days now, Stanford University released a study. It's a good one, I think. Well, at least several doctors endorsed it. And they said that the actual infection rate was minuscule compared to what was being put out in the media and by these various epidemiologists with their crackpot computer models. And everybody took a shot at Stanford. They ridiculed them. Oh, it's just one study. That can't be true. They're just looking at one side of the issue. They don't take everything into account, yada, yada. Well, here's the deal. Stanford now has been 100% vindicated by, can you believe this? The Center for Disease Control themselves? Yes. The CDC confirms an extremely low COVID-19 death rate. Can't make this up. It is ironic that it would be the CDC that would do this. But is the media paying any attention to the CDC on this? No. It goes against the narrative. The narrative has not been dictated by the CDC. The narrative is dictated by the technocrats who also are running the media stories, the media spin cycle. Oh dear. So the CDC has now independently confirmed recent research by Stanford. This exposes the technocrat hysteria, by the way, doesn't it, as being man-made and not based on any real verified data. They had no verified data. When this all started, there was no data. All there was some stories floating out of China. Why would anybody trust anything coming out of China? I can't figure, but they did. And so they had no hard data on anything. There wasn't even a semblance of hard data where somebody said, oh, this is hard data, and they lied, and it wasn't. No, there was no facts whatsoever that went into the initial computer models. They didn't even know what they were dealing with. Scientifically speaking, they didn't know the nature yet of the virus because it had not been analyzed. It hadn't been studied in a lab. They're just flying blind as bats. I guess I made a pun. Yeah, well, Batwoman over in China, the lady that studies bats, she's had a few things to say lately, but it isn't pertaining to this story directly. So this story says, written by Daniel Horowitz, by the way, via Conservative Review, most people are more likely to wind up 6 feet under because of almost anything else under the sun other than COVID-19. The CDC just came out with a report that should be earth-shattering to the narrative of the political class, yet it will go into the thick pile of vital data and information about the virus that is not getting out to the public. For the first time, the CDC has attempted to offer a real estimate of the overall death rate for COVID-19, and under its most likely scenario, the number is 0.26%. Official estimates of a 0.4% fatality rate among those who are symptomatic and project a 35% rate of asymptomatic cases among those infected, which drops the overall infection fatality rate to just 0.26%. That is not 26%. That's 0.206%. In other words, 20% of 1%. How many ways can you say it? It's a minuscule number. That's almost exactly what the Stanford researchers pegged it a month ago and got ridiculed for it. Well, here's the data right off of their website. I encourage you to get this report off of technocracy.news and print it out and hand it around to some friends. Those who are scared to death need to see this. This is from our own CDC. Who are you going to believe? The CDC or the media? Actually, there's compelling reasons not to believe any of them, but if there was a choice, I wouldn't take the media to believe anything. I certainly would take the CDC, especially when they release something like this that is outside the party line. And this goes on. The World Health Organization is still promoting panic and fear. Oh, it's a horrible, horrible thing. All kinds of people are going to die. Oh, we all better run for the hills. The sky is falling. This story is getting really old, isn't it? I think people are really starting to see through it just intuitively. You can only keep us down so long. And after that, it ain't going to work anymore. So we have more political unrest today in our country than we've ever had before, even under Obama, I have to say. And he was a piece of work as far as dividing the country was concerned. But here we are, divided, arguing, all of these different things coming at us that are locking us down, and people are just going along, obeying everything that the government says to do. It's going to stop one day. It's going to be over. But I will say, I'm happy to say, actually, that more and more people are talking about technocracy today than ever before. Several people have reported to me that Fox News is now mentioning technocracy more, that there was a Laura Ingraham program last week, I believe, on the 20th, that had somebody on, a guest that was talking about technocracy in the right context. This is good. But there's a story that has to go out far, far wider than just one or two outlets. This is the realization that needs to be put out across America, like a blanket, like a thick fog, until it sinks into everybody and they really see what's going on. The really, really sad thing about the LSE article, that the more technocracy gets piled on top of us now, the more people beg for it. You see, they miss the connection. They don't see that the technocrats are the ones that are pulling the strings on this. We need to hold these people accountable. And they are just on the edge right now of winning the largest victory in their entire life ever since 1932, when it originally started. And I'm sad to say, again, I'm sad to say that in the meantime, some people, probably many people, are needlessly dying because this entire panic of 2020 has mishandled, misjudged, caused great harm to our medical system and to the people that would access it, and there's no way to undo that damage. On top of that, we have the lingering economic damage that's been done to the world economic system. The supply chains all around the world are disrupted currently. Some people are saying it's going to be virtually impossible to fix them to where they used to be. Plus, manufacturing centers are moving now again from around the world. Many companies are fleeing China, for instance, coming back to the United States, or they're going to Malaysia, or they're going to India. As things move around, supply chains are interrupted. That's just the way it is. So we have a very, very dim economic outlook for the next probably 2 years. The Fed is running scared on a number of issues. Economic forecasters are just absolutely in the tank right now. And the only way we'll know what's going to happen, of course, is just to wait. But here's one thing that ain't going to happen. Unless, of course, somebody interjects some new, killer thing in society that will take the place of the COVID-19 virus. That will go away. COVID-19 will fade into the distant past. Will be no more. It'll mutate. It won't be a threat in the end. And everybody's going to look around at each other, the neighbors. I can see neighbors talking on the street. Did that just happen to us? It's such a distant memory. Did it really happen to us that we locked down the entire country over something that turns out to be no worse than the standard nasty old flu bug that comes from Asia? Did we really do that? Did our politicians really lead us down the primrose path and then half beat us to death once we got halfway there? Yeah. It's going to be surreal looking back, because everybody's going to realize it was all for nothing. Who's going to be held accountable for this? It won't be the technocrats. They're above it. They have Teflon. They'll never get pegged. The technocrats are the ones who are unaccounted. They're unelected. In most cases, you don't even know who they are. And they're untouchable. They will never apologize. They will never say they're sorry. They will never recant any of their crazy, crazy prediction models. In fact, if you really want to get aggravated, I actually have seen stories in this last week covering the bases on the lower death rates that we see now and saying, see, our social distancing worked. And that's why the death rate is so low. Sorry, epidemiologist. That does not wash anymore. You're out of here. I hope you're out of here. I encourage you to spread this information around to everybody you know. I know YouTube is a small little microcosm of the universe, but there's lots of articles on Technocracy News and Trends. You can be sharing those. You can be printing them out, handing them out, putting them in a folder in case the internet ever goes down. This history will disappear in a heartbeat. Anyway, I hope that you do those things. And in the meantime, until next week, I want to encourage you to like this video if you're listening on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on any other platform, subscribe to that channel so that you get notice of when new ones come up. You can go to podbean.com or technocracy.studio, goes to the same place. And you can join the mailing list at technocracy.news. You'll find tons of information. It's available nowhere else in the world, apparently. Well, I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. We'll see you next time.